think we need to have an honest conversation about homophobia in men's fashion. And when I say homophobia, I mean a shorthand for anti-gay, anti-queer sentiment. I know some people don't like that word, but that's what I mean when I say that. So I want to get into it, but I saw this post about this J.Crew sweater. I'll just read the caption briefly. While a men's pink Fair Isle J.Crew sweater continues to spark an online debate, the company has yet to weigh in about the controversy publicly. Some social media pundits questioned the style and suggested it feminizes men. The controversy reportedly started after Juanita Broderick posted about it on X. Her post has generated more than 500,000 views. And I just gotta ask, what are we doing? It's the year of our Lord 2025. It is the current year. There's a good chance that this whole post and this whole thing is a non-controversy, nothing burger. A lot of the comments, at least on Instagram, seem to be like, what? Which is my take. But I do think, I wanted to make this video for a while. And quite frankly, I was a little nervous about it because I am a straight man. And, it's a sensitive topic. And to some extent, I thought, maybe this isn't my place to comment on this, but I often think that it actually is more meaningful, I guess, if a part of the group that's needs to be criticized is kind of self-critical, if that makes sense. So I am trying to speak to my fellow hetero fashion fans, I guess. And, I want you to try and actually hear me out on this a little bit, because I don't think I'm coming at this from a super acerbic angle. I'm not trying to berate you or whatever, but I want to come to an understanding and kind of say where I'm coming from. And also, I don't want to say a sympathetic angle, but like I said, I am also a heterosexual man. And, if you're a Christian conservative or whatever who's followed my channel or whatever, born and raised Methodist here, all right? I know what it's like coming up as a guy who gets teased like the rest of us, and also from the Christian angle. So I do want to get into it, and I also want to get into it from the J.Crew angle that I just brought up, but also, I'm a big fan of Rick Owens, and in particular, that's kind of where I really wanted to get in on this. So I'll tackle both. Before I do get into it in earnest, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do subscribe. It's been a lot of really great growth lately, and I very much appreciate every new sub that I get. So thank you guys for that. I guess, this is a little bit of a piggyback off of another video I made, which was sort of why men dress boring. And I think I didn't take from that people are afraid of being called gay, but that does seem to be a large part of it. And I guess what I want to say to start this off is being into fashion is inseparable from queerness. If you look at, here, I'll just do it. Here's a list of some fashion designers who are gay. Yves Saint Laurent, Jean-Paul Gaultier, Tom Ford, Alexander McQueen, Christian Dior, Karl Lagerfeld, Marc Jacobs, Gianni Versace, Calvin Klein, Christian Louboutin, Christopher Bailey, John Galliano, Thierry Mugler, J.W. Anderson, Michael Kors. Perhaps you've heard of them. And, I'll throw, he's not gay, but Rick Owens is, at the very least bisexual, so queer. If you look at the DNA of European, American, male fashion in general, it has been sculpted the entire way by queer men, voices, whatever you want to call it. It's core to the identity. I would say it's as much a part of queerness is as much a part of fashion as it is Broadway. You know what I mean? And that's not to be stereotypical. I'm just saying that that identity is woven into the very fabric of the art form. Fashion, I think, is a inherently subversive art form, right? A lot of guys maybe don't treat it that way. I think, this speaks again to the why men dress boring thing. They kind of want to figure out okay, what's a way to look nice? But even in that space, the men and women who have honed their craft for years to try and make these beautiful male silhouettes, or female silhouettes, but we're mostly talking about male fashion here, have come at it from a queer perspective, and one that challenges societal norms. What you may see as traditional today might have been I remember, this is anecdotal, but top hats. When top hats first came around, they were making women faint in the streets, right? They were seen as oh my, this subversive thing. It'd be subversive today too, but that's just because it's weird. Fashion is very reactive to what came before in a sort of countercultural way. Even something, I've brought this up before, but like something as basic these days as a leather jacket was a countercultural symbol, and it still is to an extent. Ripped jeans, how many times do you see those walking down the street? That is a counterculture thing. Queerness, I mean, break down what the word queer means. It means unusual, not usual. So by its very nature, fashion as an art form is kind of trying to be a little bit edgy and go against the mainstream. I want to go back to the J.Crew example a little bit, because this is not the first time that I've seen this within the J.Crew space. Last year during Pride Month, I saw some posts that J.Crew was doing, like celebrating, like I think it was just like queer people who wear J.Crew, like artists or professionals, whatever. And there were a shocking amount of negative comments. If I can still find some, they haven't been deleted, I'll try and put them up here, but take my word for it. I was really taken aback. Because, and maybe this is my naivete, I think a lot of people in the progressive space growing up when I was were naive in thinking like progressivism is the way of the future and everyone in my generation and everyone younger than me will be this level of progressivism and never shall it go below this. And not to be, again, I don't ever want to get too, we're talking about fashion here. Maybe you can't separate fashion from politics. I guess what I'm saying is I think we've seen a little bit of regressivism in the last couple years. And that sentiment was naive from me to think that we will never get back to the mainstream where people are essentially being homophobic out in the open, especially in a platform like Instagram, where theoretically the people talking are like my age or younger. And it was kind of shocking to me to see that. I was like, we're doing this out in the open? Again, in 2025, this sweater that we're posting here that's pink that people are having a reaction to that feminizes men. I'm old enough to remember when Kanye was coming out with his like first album wearing the pink polo and that was seen as like subversive or whatever. It's been 20 years, right? And we're still having this same conversation. So you could say, okay, but J.Crew is a little bit more of like a traditional men's brand or whatever. You know, it speaks to more like guys who just want to dress nice, don't really care that hardcore about like fashion being edgy, whatever. Menswear. And that's true to an extent. But that's where I want to pivot into talking about Rick Owens, the Dark Lord himself. Because I have also seen anti-gay sentiment when talking about Rick. Which is, I mean, that may be shocking to you because Rick himself is queer. And sort of everything that he does is by nature edgy. Like, Rick is an edgy guy. I think he manages to ride the wave of not being like so edgelord that it's like cringy, but he definitely adopts symbolism and stuff. I mean, I'll get into this a little bit later, but like the pentagram, which are deliberately meant to be provocative. And Rick himself is, like I said, he's married to Michelle Lamy, but he has a boyfriend, Tyrone. And certainly in the past couple years, I mean, I say couple years, it's now been like a decade. Rick has been much more in a, like, I think he used to be more like masculine and hard-edged and like intense and gritty and grungy. And I think he's definitely been more like effeminate, flowy, pretty, things like that more recently. You could say maybe that Tyrone influence, like I think he's said that Tyrone is his muse, or at least people have imprinted that upon him. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe people are somewhat turned off by the more recent evolution of Rick's designs, but I still think he has a lot of that core edgy grunginess in what he does. And again, you can't separate queerness from Rick because you can't separate it from fashion in general, but also everyone has their little fandoms within fashion, right? And Rick obviously has his devotees. He has people that are obsessed with Rick, but people come to Rick from different places. Like, there are seemingly a huge amount of like Playboy Cardi fans who are Rick heads because of that, right? I don't know thing one about Playboy Cardi. I came to Rick from a completely different standpoint. So I think because of that, you may have some people who are into Rick because of a celebrity they saw wear him, or they saw him in a music video, or like Ludacris was wearing him in that one commercial, which was kind of funny. Or like, again, like Jack Dorsey from Twitter or whatever. I doubt anyone's wearing Rick because of him, but you know, people come to him from different places. So maybe they don't have the background initiation to know that like where Rick is coming from with some of this stuff. So when they see something Rick puts out that's like advertisement or whatever that seems edgy or trans positive or something, they're like, get this gay shit away from me. Which I think, again, if you're like an old school Rick head, you're like, what are you talking about? Like, that's core to him, his experience. He's everything about him is like trans positive. I mean, he just did that like OnlyFans thing for like trans charities. Again, very edgy kind of approach. So that's the only thing I can think of to rationalize how these people are coming to it and not seeing that. But I'll also see like anti-gay sentiment, or just, so there's a subreddit that's fallen off more in recent years, but the male fashion subreddit is not explicitly for men's fashion, male fashion. It is kind of just an aesthetic, and usually a kind of avant-garde one. It's a very like fashion forward subreddit. And every once in a while you'll get the like lost Redditors who stumble upon it and are like, because women will post there, or you know, people presenting as women or whatever. And people will come in and they'll stumble in and be like, I thought this was male fashion subreddit. What are you doing here? What are you posting here? And inevitably those people will get downvoted and they're like, that's not what this subreddit is. But just that initial reaction against anything that could be a slight against like traditional male fashion or whatever. Like, I thought we were all wearing navy blazers here. Just seems so unopen-minded. I guess what I really want to keep coming back to, and I hope I don't sound like a broken record, but this idea that you can separate fashion from queerness just feels like a losing battle. Maybe there's some guys out there who are watching this who, you know, come at it from a more traditional menswear angle and just want to look nice and presentable, or maybe want to look attractive to women or whatever. Check this out. I wanted to make a whole video about this. If you want to look attractive to women, we're talking about the female gaze, right? The female gaze is kind of queer. What I mean, I hope I can find this meme, but it's like a meme picture of, what's his name? Matt Berry's character in What We Do in the Shadows. And he's, you know, he's got his black nail polish on and all of his rings, and he's like wearing a big vampiric getup. And it's like the female gaze is understanding that like this is more attractive than like, you know, 6'2" chiseled abs, you know, Chad or whatever. Something like that, right? So there's a little bit of, you know, women like a little bit of vulnerability, a little bit of femininity mixed in with your masculinity. It shows a sort of confidence that you're able to put yourself out there and like wear a shirt with a button that's, you know, maybe one button unbuttoned from where it should be. Or just to do something subversive in your outward appearance and not care what the criticism is that's coming in. We can get into that a little bit later. I do want to touch on the pentagram thing again, and this is where I lose everyone in the audience. I want to talk about Rick Owens, fashion in general, but Rick Owens and Satanic Panic. Because I think it's kind of part and parcel with this anti-queer sentiment, you know, because of the sort of Christian conservatism of it all. I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher the name, but they just had a great showing. Materies Fecales, Fecal Matter. They did advertising for Rick's Converse collab when it first came out. And, you know, props to Rick for putting, you know, advertising together for a big collaboration like that was genuinely subversive. Because in the comments for those posts, again, it was old, but I'll try and dig it up and post it here. There were a lot of people being like, what the hell is this? Like, genuinely offended by the weirdness of the people presenting in the ad. You know, I remember being a kid and growing up and hearing about like the Salem witch trials, right? And how silly it was that we believed that these girls were being possessed by the devil or whatever, and were accusing people of being witches and getting them killed, or at least, you know, thrown in prison. And then I heard about like, you know, Satanic Panic in like the 70s and 80s with like Dungeons and Dragons or like rock and roll music, and how if you play the record backwards, ooh, sweet Satan or whatever. And all these like suburban moms freaking out about the red pitchfork man is going to come and take your child away. And, you know, it's the kind of thing where I guess history repeats itself, but you got to learn from history or you're doomed to repeat it. And I was naive, I guess, because I always thought like, that's so funny that we used to think that. And now we know better that these fun pop cultural things are just that. I remember playing Mortal Kombat on Game Boy Not a great version. This is one of those memories that just stands out to me as a kid. Apologies for the tangent, but I remember thinking, and I said to my mom, like, "Oh, Mom, it's cool that you let us play these like violent games or whatever." And she just said to me, like, "Yeah, I'm not a worry wart." I don't know why that phrasing stands out in my head, but I remember it clear as day. And I just remember thinking, like, "Oh, that's so cool." And now I look back and I like, thank God for my mom, because I didn't turn out to be a murderer or something. You know what I mean? Like, I was able to separate, and maybe not everyone is, but I was able to separate the fiction of the violence of that game from any sort of like real world consequence. Now, I say all this as backup to say that if you are looking at a Rick Owens ad or a pentagram on Rick's clothing and saying, this means that this is satanic, you worship Satan if you participate in this, if you buy this man's clothing or follow him. Childish. That's, okay, I'm trying to be more sympathetic than that because, like I said, born and raised Methodist, right? I went to church until I was in college. Do I still go? Do I still believe in God? That's personal. I'll be honest, no, I don't. That's not to say I can't approach it from a sympathetic standpoint and, honor your faith or whatever. But I also think you need to approach it from the other angle and understand what people are doing when they're making a subversive or artistic statement. Rick's use of the pentagram is basically a shorthand for countercultural movements and saying basically a middle finger to like traditionalist values. And if that's too far for you, then okay, I get it. But like, then why are you interested in Rick in the first place? You know what I mean? Like if you're wearing like, exploder jackets and drop crotch creech cargos or whatever, are you going to Sunday mass? I guess I just don't understand it. Like either leave Rick fans alone or open yourself up to the possibility that this stuff is just kind of imagery that's not going to burn your mortal soul. I want to broaden this back out again and just say that if you're a guy who's into fashion, broadly speaking, I think I'm coming at this a little hard. And I am genuinely trying to speak to someone who may be like offended by the pink sweater or something like that. But I really gotta ask, A, does that person really exist? If that's really you, I have to ask, do you actually think that is feminizing men? And also, again, to the other point, like, what does it mean to feminize men? Because in the context of like, oh, I'm trying to dress a certain way, present a certain way, I want to be attractive to women, I want to be confident or whatever. What is more confident than wearing something that shows it outwardly, that you're not afraid of that kind of criticism? I'll go back to try and be in a sympathetic place where I say, like, I grew up, straight boy, whatever, but you still get called these names, right? And it still hurts when you're a little kid, get the F slur thrown at you or whatever. But like, I think being an adult and being a man is overcoming that and saying, like, to me, there's way more strength and confidence in wearing something that says, I don't care about that, than trying to bury it and wear something that prevents you from ever being called that again. Do you know what I mean? The need to protect yourself from ever being called gay is not as strong of a statement as coming out and being like, I don't care if I get called gay. You know what? I invite it. Go ahead. If you think I'm gay, fine. Because you're not. And also just, I do think there is more respect owed to the great fashion designers of old and new, the people who are still working every day in this field, who are queer, embrace their own sexuality, and are here to try and advance this art form that we all love and participate in. That's all I want to say. I hope I didn't come across as too aggressive on either side, but I guess I kind of want us to come to an understanding, and it really does bother me seeing this sentiment that feels so out of touch with what we're all doing as a hobby, right? We're into dressing nice. So who cares if a little bit of queerness gets mixed in there? Again, queer means unusual. Let's get some unusuality. Let's break some of the norms down. Just some, hopefully not too rambling thoughts for the day. Let me know what you think. Again, it's a sensitive topic. I don't mean to like offend anyone. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say on it for now. Let me know what you think. Do subscribe if you like this sort of just rambling video, I guess. And I'll catch you in the next one, hopefully. See you guys.